Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining our webinar on digital signatures. I'm Jonathan White, System Support Specialist for the Construction Office in Tallahassee. Assisting with the webinar today is Mike Johnson, Andrew Gormley, and Doug Martin. We hope you enjoy it and that it answers the questions you may have about this subject. As with previous webinars, everyone will be muted, but if you have any questions, please utilize the questions feature and ask any questions you may have. We will do our best to answer any questions at the end of the webinar if time permits, and we will also post the questions and answers on our website at a later date. So without further delay, let's get started. We tried to keep all the topics as simple as possible and not get too technical. If you need more information on a topic, there will be a more detailed reference document posted on our website at a later date. So the topics we will be covering is as follows. We will briefly talk about what a digital signature actually is, and if you're not familiar with the concept, get you up to speed on what we are talking about. We will go over the benefits of using a digital signature and why we are using them. We will move into talking about installing a personal certificate that you can use to sign documents. We will talk about installing root certificates that will be used to validate documents that others have signed. And then we will talk about how you can export your personal certificate to a secure file to allow you to move it to another device or to use it with our custom online application, which we will talk about later. And since we covered how to export a personal certificate, we will talk about how to import one. We will cover how to sign and validate PDF documents in Adobe Reader and Adobe Acrobat and Nuance Power PDF, as well as Bluebeam Review and Bluebeam View. Lastly, we'll talk about a custom web application that we have been designing in-house that will allow you to sign documents on a mobile device. We will discuss the concept of it and its intended use. We will then end with some closing notes. Exciting stuff, so let's get started. First up, what is a digital signature? Well, that's a good question. It is the digital replacement for a conventional pen and ink signature. With the world going digital, we have to have ways to conduct business electronically. Forms and documents have been electronic for many years, but whenever we had to sign a form to send to someone, we had to print it out, sign it, scan it, and send it to whoever. If we have to still print out a document to sign it, then we'll have an electronic version. Well, now with digital signatures, we can keep the whole process electronic. Another feature of digital signatures is it allows you to show that you acknowledged or approved the document. Just like you would physically sign a contract to say you agree to the terms, you can digitally sign it to do the same. So we know that a digital signature replaces a conventional signature, but what is it exactly? It is nothing more than a digitally encrypted file called a certificate. Your personal digital certificate usually contains personal information like your legal name, the company you work for, and your email address. It also contains something called a public key and a private key. Think of this as your digital fingerprint. You sign a document using your private key, which is unique to you. Your public key and personal information is included in the signed document. Anyone that receives your document can then validate your signature using the included public key. What makes a personal certificate trustworthy is when it has been issued by a certificate authority or a CA. When they issue a personal certificate, they sign your certificate using their certificate called a root certificate. This in turn means that your certificate is now linked to their certificate, which forms what is called a chain of trust. Sometimes they may sign your personal certificate with an intermediate certificate, which was signed with a root certificate. Now, whenever you sign a document and send it to someone, that document can be validated and they can use the same root certificate and intermediate certificate, if applicable, to verify your certificate. So now that we covered what a digital signature is, what are the benefits? Well, obviously, it lets us sign a digital document. Before we had to print the document out, review it, physically sign it, scan it back in, and send it on its way. Now all we have to do is open it, review it, slap our digital signature on it, and send it on. The best part, you don't have to walk to the printer. Unfortunately, that's not a bullet point. However, saving paper, work, and time is one. No more printing, scanning, and walking to the printer and back. Another benefit of digital signatures is security. In fact, a digital signature is more secure than a conventional signature. It provides what we call the security triangle. First, a digital signature provides document security. When a digital document is signed, a hash is generated from the part of the document that is tied to that signature. If the document is changed in any way after it's signed, the hash of the changed document will not match up to the one in the signature, so the signature will be invalidated. Secondly, it provides the security for the author of the document. This keeps anyone else from claiming the document or the author from denying ownership. And third, it provides security for the recipient of the document. If the signatures are valid, then the recipient knows that the document hasn't been changed since it was signed, and that the person that has signed is indeed the person they say they are. So we know about digital certificates and the benefits of using them for digital signatures. But how do we install one?
Well, we are going to cover how to install a digital certificate from Identrust. Once you do all the fun paperwork and submit it to Identrust, they will process it and create a digital certificate for you.
You will then get some paperwork back in the mail with instructions on how to obtain your certificate. On a side note, isn't it funny that in order to obtain something to enable a paperless environment, we have to conduct business on paper? Anyways, moving on.
Alright, to install your Identrust certificate, you will need the instructions that was mailed to you from Identrust. And the first thing to do is go to www.identrust.com/install. And on this page you'll click I'm ready, and it will ask you for your activation code and your account password. Your activation code is in the instructions that was mailed back to you. Your account password is the password that you used when you first created an Identrust account, and that was when you were requesting a certificate. So you type in your activation code, your activation password, and click Next. Alright, so your process might look a little different than mine. I've already retrieved my certificate, so it might be a little different than the process for first retrieving your certificate. So I'm going to click I'm ready, and I'm going to put in my account password and click Next. Alright, so on this page we can keep the default sitting here, and we want to click Next here at the bottom. On the screen here, we want to make sure we have it set as high. If we set the security level to medium, it will prompt us every time we use our certificate to grant or deny permission, but by setting it to high, every time it prompts us when using the certificate, it will also require a password, so we want to set this to high. And now we want to create a password to protect our certificate. First things first though, we want to change this and give it a more personal name, such as personal certificate. That way when it prompts us for a password, it will tell us it's for a personal certificate. And let's go ahead and give our certificate a password, and this is the password we'll put in every time we sign a document. And we click Finish, and let's try that again. There we go. So every time we go to sign a document and it prompts us for a password, it will tell us it's for a personal certificate. Alright, click OK. On this screen, we can review the information about our certificate, verify it's right, and when we're done, click Next. And now the certificate has been installed, and we just want to verify that it has been. In case anything goes wrong, you can copy this URL and close out any browsers, go to this URL, and try again. So we're going to click Next. And apparently something went wrong. So let's try to visit that URL and see if we can verify it. Okay, there we go. And we have a new certificate here. Select that certificate, say OK, put in our password that we created for it. Say OK, and we have successfully installed our certificate.
Alright, we covered how to install a personal certificate from IdenTrust, and now we will talk about how to install a root certificate from IdenTrust. Unlike installing a personal certificate, installing a root certificate from many providers should be pretty much uniform. That being said, that might not always be the case. The provider you are downloading the root certificate from should provide instructions on the process. You can refer to the more detailed reference document that we will post at a later date that will cover how to install certificates from all supported CA providers. Also, if you are using a personal certificate from IdenTrust, then you should already have the root certificate installed. If you don't use a personal certificate from IdenTrust and need to validate a document signed by an IdenTrust certificate, then you will need to install an IdenTrust root certificate.
The first step in installing any root certificate is to visit the Certificate Authority's website for which you need a root certificate. In our case, we're on the IdenTrust website. The specific URL can be seen at the top of this video. Once on the root certificate download page, we want to scroll all the way down to the bottom. At the bottom, we have two download options. And the first download option is for ACES certificates issued before November 6, 2015. So if you need to validate any IdenTrust certificate that was issued before that date, then you need to download the certificate. If you need to validate any IdenTrust certificate that was issued on or after November 7, 2015, then you need to use the second option. We're going to use the second option. However, it wouldn't hurt to download and install both certificates. So we click on the bottom link to download and choose a location to save it to. In our case, we went ahead and saved it to the desktop. So now we just find the certificate file on our desktop. And in order to install it, we have to right click on it and choose Install Certificate. If you double click on it, it will just open the file for viewing. Once the certificate import wizard is open, click Next. On the following screen, it is asking us what store we want to install the certificate in. The first option is to let Windows automatically pick the certificate store based on the certificate type. And this is normally the best option. The second option here is to choose the store to install the certificate in manually. And it's very important to note that if you choose the second option and the certificate file you are importing includes more than one certificate, then all certificates in that file will be installed in the store you choose. So if your certificate file includes a personal certificate and a root certificate, and you choose to install them in the personal store, both certificates will get placed in the personal store, and you don't want to do that. So always use the first option, except in special cases. We then click Next, click Finish, and OK. That's it. The certificate is installed.
Now that we have our personal certificate installed, what if we need to export it for some reason? If you want to use the FDOT SON application that we are developing, you will need to export your certificate as a P12 or a PFX file. So let's go over how to export a personal certificate.
Alright, so in order to export a certificate, we're going to be using the Windows Certificate Manager. And to open the Windows Certificate Manager, we click the Start button down here, or tap the Windows key, and we type in certmgr.msc, press enter, or click it at the top of the list there. And in the Windows Certificate Manager, we have two views, the view on the left and the view on the right. The view on the left lists all the available certificate stores, and the view on the right shows the contents of the selected item in the view on the left. So let's expand Personal here and choose the Certificates folder. Over here we find the certificate we want to export. In this case it's this one here that was issued by Adentrust. We highlight it, right click on it, choose All Task, and Export. That will bring up the certificate export wizard, and we click Next. This screen is asking us, do we want to export our private key or not? If we choose no, it will just export our certificate with the public key, but we want to export the private key as well. So we choose yes, click Next. We want to export this certificate as a PFX file, and we want to choose this first option here, include all certificates in the certification path. And what that will do is include all the certificates in the chain, so it'll include my personal certificate, intermediate certificate, and root certificate. If we left that unchecked, it would just export the personal certificate. If we check the second option here, it would delete the private key after the export, so if you were moving from one computer to another, you could choose this option and it would remove your certificate off this computer, and then you could take the file and install it on another machine. And we want to click and select Export All Extended Properties. So we click Next, and now we type in a password to secure this file with. And make sure that you type them so they match. And click Next. And let's try that one more time. There we go. So now we choose a place to export our file to and give it a name. And say Save. And we click Next and Finish. And now it's asking for our password that we used to originally secure the file. Type that in, say OK, say OK, and that's it. The file has been exported to a PFX file.
So we just seen how to export a personal certificate, but how do we import it back in? Well, we're going to cover the procedure to do that now. Let's see how we import a certificate.
Alright, to install a certificate that's in a PFX format, we can right click on it and choose Install PFX, or just double click the file, and that will bring up the certificate import wizard. So we click Next and click Next, and what we want to do here is type the password that was used to secure that file. And the first option here is Enable Strong Private Key Protection. So by checking this, what it will do is every time we use this certificate, it will prompt us for a password. And also the second option, mark the key as exportable. If you check this option, it will allow you to export your private key from this machine. If you leave it unchecked, you will not be able to export this key from this machine. And we want to include all standard properties. Click Next. And just as with the root certificate, we want to let it automatically choose the stored installer certificates in. If we choose to choose a store manually, since we have more than one certificate type in this file, we have our personal certificate, intermediate certificate, and root certificate. If we choose this option, it will install all three of those certificates in the store we choose, and we don't want to do that. So choose automatically select certificate store. Click Next, click Finished, and we're creating a new protected item here. So we want to set the security level, and we want to set it as high. And what this will do is require your password every time this item is used. So that will help secure your digital signature. We click Next, and here we can change the name and make it a little more specific, so we can type in personal certificate, and we give it a password to secure this item. So whenever we use our certificate file, this is the password we'll have to type in. Click Finish, and you notice now that it says personal certificate here, and we click OK, and the import was successful. Say OK. That's it.
Alright, let's switch gears here. We talked about certificate management. Now let's talk about how to use our certificate for sign-in documents. The first application we will show you how to sign documents in is Adobe Reader and Adobe Acrobat. So let's take a look at signing a document using Adobe.
Alright, so we have one of our mini forms open here in Adobe Reader DC. If you're using Adobe Acrobat DC, the process would be exactly the same. So if you notice, we have two signature blocks here. So we're just going to sign the contractor signature block, and do that. We hover over it and click it. That brings up the sign document window. The first option here at the top allows us to choose which digital certificate we want to sign with. So if you had more than one digital certificate installed, this is where you would choose which one you want to use. Since we only have one, we only have one option. Right below that, it shows who that certificate was issued by, so that helps you identify that you have the correct certificate selected. If you needed even more details on the selected certificate, you could click More Details. Moving on down is where we customize the appearance of our digital signature. So we can use the standard view, which is configured right out of the box by Adobe, or we could come in and create a new appearance, and we could give it a name, choose our picture or graphic options, choose what variables we want to be displayed on our signature, and our text alignment. And we're just going to choose a custom one we already have configured. At the bottom here we have our reason, location, and contact information. And for a reason, we're just going to say we're approving this document. We'll leave the location as it is and not worry about putting in any contact information. So we click Sign, and here we could just click Save, and that would overwrite our original file with the new signed version. And since we don't want to do that, we're just going to say no. Instead, we're going to give it a new name and say Save. And now it's asking us to grant or deny Adobe Reader permission to our digital certificate. So since we want to sign this document, we want to grant Adobe Reader permission to use our certificate, and we put in the password that was used to secure our digital certificate. Say OK, and that's it. The document is signed, and you can see it's a valid signature. Also, this form has been set up so that it locks certain fields when a signature is signed. So you notice that the fields are not able to be changed, and that prevents accidental or purposely changing the data, which would invalidate the signature. Also to note, if you don't have the reason and location and contact information fields, the way you can get those is go to Edit, Preferences, or just hit Control K on your keyboard. And in the left menu, choose Signatures, and up under Creation and Appearance, choose More. And right down here, when signing, just check Show Reasons and check the option Show Location and Contact Information. And that's how you can get those options when you sign a document.
Alright, so we've seen how to sign a document in Adobe Reader and Adobe Acrobat, but what about Nuance Power PDF? A nice thing about Nuance is that it is very similar to Adobe products in many aspects. So let's see how we sign a document using Nuance.
Alright, so we have the same form open here in Nuance Power PDF Advanced. And signing a document using Nuance is pretty much the same as signing a document in Adobe. One thing I do want to point out is it's a little hard to see the fields in Nuance, but one way to resolve that is down here in the bottom right, in this little balloon. If you click Highlight Fields, that will actually highlight the editable fields, so it would make it a little bit easier to see what fields are available to edit. To sign the document, you just hover over the signature block and click, and that brings up the signed document window. And right here at the top is where you choose which certificate you want to use to sign the document with. One thing to note is that Nuance doesn't appear to filter certificates by their intended purpose as Adobe or Bluebeam does. So it's important to note that you select the right certificate. And one way to verify that is by looking at the issuer, and we can see this certificate was issued by Adentrust and the storage location, and in this case it's in the Windows Certificate Store. So we know we have the right certificate. If you need to view more details on the selected certificate, you could click the Details button. Moving down, we have the reason, location, and contact information fields, just like we do in Adobe and Bluebeam. Also down here at the bottom we have a available timestamp field as well. However, we don't have a timestamp server configured. So let's go ahead and choose our reason, and I am approving this document. Put in our location, and we don't need the contact information blank. Click Next. And this is where we customize our signature appearance. We can go with the standard appearance that was configured by Nuance, or if we have a custom appearance, we can select that here. If we wanted to, we could create a new signature appearance, come in and give it a title, configure our graphic or image properties, the fields that's shown on our signature, and text alignment. Or we could edit a appearance already. Also, we have the save and save as options, so if we click save, we can just overwrite the file with the new signed version. Or we can do save as, and that's what we're going to do. Give it a different name. and click Save. And now here it's asking for our password for our digital certificate. And also, if you remember, when we imported our certificate, we personalized the name, and as you can see here, it's now showing personal certificate, so it's a little more specific there. And we click OK, and the document has been signed. If we hover over it, we can see that it's a valid signature. Also, if you notice, the fields have been locked just like they have been in Adobe. And by turning on the highlight fields, that makes that easier to see. Also, if you don't have the reason and location fields, you can click File, click Options, in the left menu choose Signatures. Up under Creation and Appearance, click More, and just simply check Show Reasons and Show Location and Contact Information. And that's it.
Alright, we've seen how to sign a document using Adobe Products and Nuance Power PDF. How do we sign a document using Bluebeam Review or Bluebeam View? Fortunately, the process is very similar, so if you're familiar with signing a document using any of the other applications we covered, then you shouldn't have any trouble signing in Bluebeam. Before we look at the process, let's cover a few important points about using Bluebeam. Bluebeam can be used for marking up and creating PDFs. However, we strongly recommend that you do not use it for signing PDFs. Bluebeam may be used to sign a form or a document with a single signature field, but beyond that it gets very complicated. In our research, we have found that as of the current release of Bluebeam, it doesn't work well with other products such as Adobe and Nuance. So again, we're going to show you the process, but we do not recommend using Bluebeam to sign. This topic will be covered in more detail in the detailed reference document that will be posted at a later date. Alright, let's look at the process of signing a document in Bluebeam.
Alright, so we have the same document open here in Bluebeam View, and Bluebeam View is just the free reader version of Bluebeam Review, just like Adobe Reader is the free version of Adobe Acrobat. Alright, so to sign a document using Bluebeam View or Bluebeam Review, we find the signature block we want to sign, hover over it, and click, just like in any of the other applications. And here at the top we choose our digital ID or the digital certificate that we want to use to sign this document. And one nice thing about Bluebeam View is that it filters the certificates like Adobe does, and you ain't got to worry about selecting a certificate that's not intended for signing documents like you are in Nuance. So we have our certificate selected. If we needed to view more information on our selected certificate, we could click View to view that information. And for our signature type, we want to make sure we have digital signature selected. And our reason, we have I am approving this document already selected, so we'll just use that. And our location is already set, and we won't bother putting in any contact information. And down here at the bottom, we have our signature appearance options, so we can use the standard appearance that's already pre-configured. We could edit that appearance, or we could come in here and create a new appearance, give it a name, configure the graphic or image properties, the fields that we wanted to show, and the alignment just like all the other applications. We're just on to go with the standard appearance option. We say OK, and just like with Adobe, we could say save and overwrite the file and save the new signed version, or we could give it a new name, which we're going to do, and save it as a new file and say save. And just like the other two applications, it's asking us, do we want to give Bluebeam access to our digital certificate? So we say grant, type in the password used to protect our digital certificate, and say OK. And the document is signed. We have a green check.
Okay, we covered how to sign documents in all the major applications, but what if you want to work in the field and you don't have a Windows tablet handy? All you have on you is your iPad. Well, with our FDOT Sign application, you can sign a PDF document using any iOS or Android device. We would love to show you a demonstration of the application, but it's still in the development phase. With that being said, we will share the concept of it with you. Once the application is finished, we will provide better documentation on it. Firstly, let's discuss how to gain easy access to the application. One way would be to add a bookmark in Safari or whatever browser you may be using. However, let's make it even easier to access. Let's add a shortcut to the home screen. To do that, tap Safari to open it, and then we want to navigate to the URL of the application. As of right now, the application isn't live, so we don't have an URL for it, but once it goes live, we will provide you with the URL. Once we have the application open in the browser, we want to open the Actions menu. To do that, click on the center icon, the square with arrow pointing out the top. In the Actions menu, you want to tap Add to the home screen. This will allow us to give our shortcut a name, edit the name of the shortcut to whatever you like, and click Add. That is all there is to it. We now have a shortcut on the home screen that we can use to easily access the FDOT Sign application. Now let's talk about the application itself. How is it supposed to work? Well, once you sign into the application, you will be able to tap the Upload button, which will give you the option to upload your files. If you have Microsoft OneDrive or Google Drive installed on your device, there will be an option for where you can choose a file from. By choosing an option such as OneDrive, you can then choose a PDF file that is stored in that cloud service to upload. You then repeat the process to upload your certificate in the PFX or P12 file format. After you have a PDF and your certificate selected, you can tap the Submit button. The application will parse the PDF file and return a list of available signature fields that you can sign. You then choose the signature field you want to sign. After choosing a signature field, you then enter your password that is used to protect your certificate, as well as the location and an optional file name. Then you will choose a reason for signing the document from a drop-down list. And lastly, you choose the delivery method you would like. You can download the signed PDF document and store it back in a cloud storage service such as OneDrive. You could have it emailed to you, or you can have it emailed to one of many email addresses that you have stored on your application account. Once you choose a delivery method, you just tap Submit, and that's it. So that is kind of an overview of the FDOT Sign application. Like I stated earlier in the presentation, once the application is finalized and goes live, we will have better documentation on its use. Now it's time to change gears again. We covered how to sign a document, so how do we validate a document that has been signed? We're going to cover how to do that now using Adobe Reader. The process would be the same if you were using Adobe Acrobat as well.
Alright, so we have our example form open here in Adobe Reader DC, and it's been signed, and so we want to validate this signature. To validate the signature in either Adobe Reader DC or Adobe Acrobat DC, it's the same. First way we can do is we can hover over this signature and we can see that it's a valid signature. The other way is we can look up here at the blue ribbon. It tells us that it's signed and all signatures are valid. We can also click the signature panel button here or click the pen icon in the side menu, and that will open up the signatures menu. We can see we have one signed signature field and one unsigned signature field. We expand this top one here, we see the signature is valid. It tells us that the root certificate was located in the Windows Trusted Certificate Store. It lets us know that the document hasn't been modified since the signature was applied. It lets us know it was signed by the current user and that the time was pulled from the signer's computer. And it's also long-term validation enabled, which means that this signature can be verified years and years down the road. If we expand signature details, we also can see the reason that the signer gave for signing this document, the location they entered, and we also see down here that the date and time that the signature was validated. If we click on this signature, it'll let us know it's valid and who it was signed by. And it tells us that the document wasn't modified since the signature was applied and the document was signed by the current user. We click signature properties, we can get all that same information this way as well. One cool feature is if we click down here on advanced properties, it will tell us here that the signature was created using Adobe Acrobat Reader DC, and if it was signed in Adobe Acrobat, it would tell us that as well, or if it was signed in Nuance, it would say that here. The only one that don't really seem to show up here is any document that was signed using Bluebeam. One of the important things about validating signatures using Adobe Reader or Adobe Acrobat is if we click Edit, go to Preferences, and up under Verification, click the More button, just to make sure that these two options are checked up under Windows Integration, validating signatures and validating certified documents. This essentially tells Adobe Reader or Adobe Acrobat to use the certificates that's installed in the Windows Certificate Store. If these ain't checked, any signatures that link back to certificates in the Windows Certificate Store will not be validated, and they will show as unknown or unvalidated. Another important thing here is to make sure for the time setting it's set to time at which the signature was created, and also to check require certificate revocation check-in. One more important thing here is up under Identities and Trusted Certificates. If we click the Trusted Certificates here, is to make sure that you have no certificates here. Essentially what this is it's a separate certificate store that Adobe Acrobat and Adobe Reader keeps as a separate entity from the Windows Certificate Store. So if you accidentally trust a certificate and it gets put under the Trusted Certificate Store, any documents that are signed using that certificate will be trusted and they will show as valid, even though the signature isn't really a valid signature. So it's probably good practice just to keep this list empty. And that is really it to validating a signature using Adobe Reader.
Alright, so we talked about validating a document in Adobe. Let's talk about validating a document in Nuance. The nice thing is how similar the processes are in both programs.
Alright, so we have the same form open here in Nuance Power PDF Advanced. And as far as validating a signature in Nuance. It's pretty much the same as Adobe Acrobat or Adobe Reader. The first way we can validate our signature is to click the little signature icon over here in the left menu, or we could choose Security and Signatures, or we could click the little information bubble down here and choose Signatures panel. So we notice that we have two signature blocks in this document. We see the first one has been signed, the second one is unsigned. Looking at the first signature, we see that it's revision 1 of 1, that it's a valid signature. We see who it was signed by, the date and time that it was signed, as well as the location and reason. The other way we can validate the signature is to simply click on the signature, and that will show us that the signature is valid, that the document hasn't been changed since the signature was applied, that the signature's identity is valid, and the certificate hasn't been revoked. For click properties, we can get all those same details plus a few more. One thing important to note here though is that Nuance keeps a local trusted store similarly to Adobe Reader, Adobe Acrobat, and Bluebeam products. So if you click on the Signatures tab and do Trusted Identities, any certificates or identities that's stored in here, any signatures that are linked to these certificates stored in here will actually show as valid. So it's good practice to keep this local store clean and just install all valid root certificates in the Windows Certificate Store. And as far as validating documents in Nuance, that's all there is to it.
Verifying signatures in Adobe and Nuance is pretty straightforward. However, it is a little different in Bluebeam, unfortunately, and it isn't so straightforward. Let's see how we validate a signature using Bluebeam.
Alright, so we have the same signed form open here in Bluebeam View. Bluebeam View is just the free PDF reader from Bluebeam, but if you're using Bluebeam Review, the process for validating a document would be the same. The first way we can tell we have a valid signature is by the green check mark. The other way is simply hover over the signature and it tells us the signature is valid. If we want to get a little more detail on the signature, we click the pen icon up here. That'll open the signatures menu and we can see the document was signed by me. If we expand this, we can see that the signature is valid, the reason that they gave for signing the document, and the sign-in time. If you notice, it doesn't show the unsigned signature fields, and it doesn't give you as much detail as Adobe or Nuance would. Another thing is, just as with Adobe and Nuance, Bluebeam has a local certificate store. To view that, we click File, click the Signatures icon here, and choose Trusted Identities. And that'll pull up the Trusted Identities store. And just as with Nuance and Adobe, you want to make sure to keep this list empty. If you accidentally trusted a false certificate or a fake certificate, any documents that were signed using that certificate would show as valid. So it's just best to keep this list empty and make sure that all your valid root certificates are stored in the Windows Certificate Store. As far as validating a document in Bluebeam, that's all there is to it.
So this pretty much concludes our webinar on digital signatures. If you need any more information, you can visit the links above. Also, this webinar will be posted on the Project Solve site, which is the top link for viewing at a later date. Now we will try to answer some of the questions that you may have. I saw we got a couple of good questions here. Let me get them sorted. One of the really good ones I've seen that made a good point here is when you are installing a certificate, you will have to have administrative rights to your box. So if you don't have administrative rights on the PC that you're installing the certificate on, you will have to get those granted to you by OIT.
You want to take the next one? Why would you export?
Yeah, actually, that's a good question. Basically, when you export, it makes moving your personal certificate from one machine to another machine a whole lot easier. If you actually do it through IdenTrust, what it will do is it will actually revoke your old certificate. So the certificate installed on PCA will be revoked and no longer be good. So you get the certificate on PCB, but you lose the certificate that would be installed on PCA. So exporting is the easier way to move your certificate from one computer to another, or to put it on multiple PCs.
Okay, also, when we get the F.sign application done, you will need to do this in order to sign with a mobile device.
That's correct, yes.
Mike, you want to take the one asking Bluebeam and IdenTrust has the same function?
I'm not exactly sure what he was trying to imply there. IdenTrust is the certificate authority, so maybe he can expand on that question and provide a little bit more details. That was, because I'm not exactly sure what he's asking there.
Yeah, I'm lost on that as well.
Udin, if you will, just type another question and send it in.
Basically, what I'm getting out of that question is Bluebeam is actually the application that is used to create and mark up and sign a PDF document. IdenTrust is the company that provides certificates to sign a PDF.
Yeah.
So that's basically what I can get out of that one.
The next question is, once a document is signed, how can another person save and sign the document digitally? If the form has been set up to accept more than one signature, as in the example that we showed, when the second person opens it up, they can simply sign the document just like the first person did. They can click on the next signature block and go through the process of digitally signing that second signature block. If it's a document that doesn't have any signature blocks on it at all, Nuance and Adobe do provide means for you to insert signature blocks, and we can cover that in more details in a later topic. Most of our construction forms have been redone to already include all the signature blocks when and where required. So that's one of the main reasons why we did not provide that in this webinar, because we were more or less covering forms that you're going to be using.
The next one here I was reading, for cases where you may want to make markups on a signed document, such as final estimates, making markups on as-built plans, what is the process so that a signature is not invalidated through a markup? Once final markups are made, it seems that the plans or document would have to go back to the EOR to re-sign. If this is the case, it may defeat the intent of the current procedure.
I believe, Jonathan, that using Bluebeam, if you sign the document using the certification process instead of the digital signature, which, if y'all will remember, on the Bluebeam application, you had digital signature, and then there was another option underneath that says digital certificate. If you use that second option, then it allows you to certify certain portions and certain pages, and so then you would basically be able to certify just certain parts of that document with each one of your signatures. I believe that would be the way you would handle this particular case.
Okay. Yeah, I would say if the document has multiple signature blocks, to not use Bluebeam, to use either Adobe Reader, Acrobat, or Nuance to handle that. But if the document doesn't have signature blocks or fields, yeah, that would probably be the way to go.
Yeah. We may have to do some more research on using the markup features of Bluebeam. That's one thing we have not tested. One of the other questions is, do digital signatures need to be notarized? The process in which you have to go through to get a digital signature requires notarization. So in a way, yes, but the actual digital signature itself doesn't have to be notarized. It's getting your digital certificate requires notarization. And then the next question was by Jonathan Upfold. If I have an IdenTrust signature on my office computer and I export it to my iPad for field work, first part is you can't export it to the iPad. It doesn't provide any way of doing that. But you can export it to other computers. And so the answer to the question is yes, you can have your certificate on multiple devices. The iPad just doesn't provide a way for you to use it. That's the reason why we're developing a web application that will allow you to sign documents on an iPad and an Android device.
Right.
You have to put your certificate on the OneDrive that's associated with your iPad.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah, you can actually import the certificate to iPad, but unfortunately there's no apps that will actually utilize that certificate.
Right.
So
so it's kind of useless.
Right. One of the other questions I've seen is, can you explain the difference again between a personal and a root certificate? Basically, your personal certificate is your personal identity. It includes your private key and your public key. So any document you sign, you will be signing using your personal certificate. The root certificate is actually what was used to sign your personal certificate, is what actually makes your personal certificate a valid certificate. And you'll use that root certificate to validate your personal certificate. I don't know if one of y'all can explain it any better than that.
Let me try. The root certificate is issued by the certificate authority, which would be the IdenTrust company or Adobe. They have theirs. There's many companies that provide it, and they're listed on that website, at the FDOT website. What those are, every certificate that's issued from that company can be validated through those root certificates. So if they can have, 60,000 certificates out there that are being validated by that one root certificate. So when you put the root on your computer, you're giving yourself the ability to validate other people's signatures.
Yeah, the next question is, if a project has a JPA, how does the signature work for the third-party agencies? Sarah, could you explain what a JPA is? I'm not sure what you mean by that. So we'll be able to answer that question.
I can help with that. That's a joint project agreement.
Okay.
That's when, like, a city agency is agreeing to do something alongside of an FDOT project. Joint project agreement would be that. Essentially, what they would need to do is provide their own digital signing to the document, and they would have to have digital signature certificates to do that.
There's more than one. IdenTrust is just the one the DOT is using, but there's 4 or 5 others that we know of, and those agencies would be able to use any of those to get a certificate of authority and sign documents. Correct?
Right. There's many ways to get documents signed. Some companies provide the same kind of features that we're going to provide with the F-dot sign, where you upload your document to their website and sign it, and they charge you a fee for it. I mean, there's many ways to get documents signed.
But one point we need to make sure everybody understands is DOT requires a NIST Level 3 certificate authority for digital signatures. A lot of companies out there that provide means of signing digitally, they're less than Level 3. We cannot accept those, and we will not accept those. So so there's going to on the website we're going to have a list of all the ones that are approved, and if you get a digital signature for one that's not on that list, you need to first contact us and let us know so that we can confirm whether it is a NIST level 3 or not. And if it's not, then it will not be a valid signature, and you will have to reject it and send it back to the person that sent it to you.
And basically what makes a NIST Level 3 is the process you have to go through to get that certificate. It's a little more stringent. So
yes, Sarah's asking also how I guess you're asking how do you get a digital certificate? For DOT employees, that is done through an ARP request.
Alrighty. Is that all the questions we have?
One more person asked a question about the forms. We do have some of the forms. They are available for our Project Solve sites whenever that goes online on July 1st. If you go to the Infonet page and go to the construction office, under the cars menu, you'll see a choice called forms, construction forms data. I think it's that. And if you click on that, that gives you the ability to get all the current forms that we've modified. There's still more to be done. We still have a lot to do, but that's a list of all the ones that have currently been done and gives you the ability to have them emailed to yourself.
All right. Who is supposed to validate a signature?
Doug, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I'll try. Whoever is given the responsibility of making sure the documents are correct, that would be the ones that are approving things to go to EDMS and things like that. If legal may be involved in that, there's still some issues to hammer out on how to get these things paperlessly through the entire system. But when you receive one, if you have a root certificate installed on your PC, it'll tell you if it's valid or not, just by floating over it with the cursor.
And if you don't have the root certificate installed, you can go to our website and get instructions on how to get the root certificate installed, or how to get more information on how to get it installed.
Correct. Yep. They can refer to this section in the webinar, and also, like I said, there will be a reference document that will be posted that will have all those instructions in it as well.
I believe we've covered all the questions that's been posted.
I think we have. And like I said, this webinar will be posted on our website, so you can reference it anytime in the future. And the questions, we'll take them, answer them, and they'll be posted to the website as well.